Hey everyone, happy Friday. Uh, Sorry for the slight delay. It was we were avoiding gardeners. They were Gardeners were sent from the centralized exchanges to shut everything down. We had to, we had to
It was
send.
Gary. It was totally Gary.
Yeah, yeah, I saw. So yeah, happy Friday. We're gonna get officially launched in just like another minute or so, as more people trickle in. But yeah, it's been a crazy week, and I think three letters in everyone's mind is always the WEN, and I don't know if I could fully take credit for turning that into a meme, in, but it's it
You
definitely is.
definitely made it a meme, at least on the Maya Discord. So I'm not sure if to thank you or blame you.
Yeah, the problem is at some point there will be a launch, and then people won't have purpose in their lives anymore. There won't be the next thing until it's like, but then it just becomes less of a Dash thing and more of just the next feature, like when streaming swaps, when
When Savers,
when
yeah.
Thorfi, when whatever, or the lending thing, or all the other stuff, and then back to when Moon, when Lambo, all the usual things. But yeah, it's been quite interesting. I was helping with some press releases earlier today too, so we're definitely getting ready for just everything to go. I was checking on some of the volume statistics, and yeah, I think had a few like $500,000 volume days on Maya so far, which is pretty nice.
Well, they should be daily, and then should be just a fraction of what we have daily. But we'll get there. Still early days.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. It is kind of maybe we should say that for the. Let me just see, make sure enough people are watching. Yeah, there's a few. All right, let's roll the intro real quick, which everyone else can see. You can't see. Sorry, but roll the intro and then we'll get going. All right, so hey everyone, officially welcome to Dash Podcast. Yeah, happy Friday, everyone. I'm joined by the one and only Aaluxx of the Maya Protocol. How's it going? Or I should have said that right in the middle of a sip. Should have timed that better. But yeah, so how's your week been?
All great. A loaded week, I would say, with a lot of surprises as always. But all good, and just proud of what we're doing. So on to the next week. Still not
Yeah,
over though. It's rarely a free weekend here at Maya.
yeah, of course. It's it Work never stops, obviously. So just remind you guys, leave comments in the live chat, also in my Discord, and I will put them up on the screen, answer them, all the other stuff. So first off, let's start out with this whole thing. Really quick to get the meme out of the way. A lot of people will be asking when, and is there a is there currently an idea of when the next version of Maya is expected to launch, which will have the Dash integration?
Well, right now what we're working on, we're fairly close, but we have a pipeline, right? So it's not
Mm-hmm.
only doing the future for Dash and liquidity nodes was ready, but then you unit tests, and then do something called smoke test, which essentially simulates Dash, and then we have the regression test, which does that a bit more hardcore, and then we have stage tests, and that's where we are now. And something we found out on the stage test is that chain locks are more chaotic than they are in when you have a Dash testing environment. Because StageNet has the benefit of testing Maya with real Dash and real Bitcoin and real ETH and real Rune. So we essentially went quickly back to the drawing board on a few things regarding how ChainLocks are handled. Working in collaboration with Dash Incubator, a great team, by the way, super professional, and I'm very proud to work with them. But the folks there and us together, we essentially came up with a small algorithm on how to cope with the chain locks. For those of you not familiar with Dash, essentially Dash is kind of like a POS on a POW. So you have kind of miners doing proof of work, and then master nodes locking the one of the chains with consensus. So it kind of is more similar to Tendermint than I initially thought. So when you have a Cosmos-based chain like Maya, like Thorchain, like Cosmos, Kujira, um, essentially you have your node set and they're doing a regular consensus on blocks, and it's kind of a round robin on how the block proposer is chosen. Now on Dash is very similar, which is the block proposing is done through mining, so proof of work like Bitcoin. But then a set of 400 master nodes is chosen randomly to have 67% consensus, like Tendermint, on locking a block. So the benefit of locking a block, as opposed to just keep on mining the longest chain, is that you essentially provide certainty that that payment is now set in stone, and you're not going to have this chain reorganization down the line. So you have kind of your mining going and then locking blocks behind it all the time with 67% consensus of master nodes. So quite interesting. And just the problem arises when there is a block that is not chain locked in time, and how to handle that. Because right now, essentially, what we were saying is no, it's going to be chain locked. But then when it wasn't on time, essentially what Dash does is move on forward with mining, and then eventually a chain lock will happen in a block, and that will automatically chain lock all the blocks behind it. But what we need to essentially be doing is that part of kind of being on the lookout for the next chain lock block, then follow or trace it back to where we are, and scan each block ahead kind of in order chronologically, to not process. What we obviously don't want to do is orphan a transaction or double spend by mistake or stuff like that. So we need to kind of handle that in a more specific way. But we got it now. We are now essentially going back through that pipeline. So fixing unit tests in light of these changes of the chain lock, fixing stage. Right now we're at fixing smoke tests, and then we go again and stage test again. And with regards to liquidity nodes, we're also just fixing a few of the structures so that there's more continuity. But yeah, as soon as it's the next thing. So it's like right around the corner. It's literally the next thing to come. So very exciting. We'll just ship when it's ready. We cannot jump the gun. But yeah, it means testing was successful, by the way.
Yeah.
It's better to catch these things before that. This means StationNet was very valuable, since having it directly in mainnet would have been more chaotic. So test is good.
Yeah, and it's one thing that's been pretty interesting, and maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of like mention a few things that make Dash unique. Is Dash started as basically first a Litecoin fork, then a Bitcoin fork, that then had a incentivized node structure called master nodes to do a few special things. And other than that, on the surface, it might seem that that's kind of still the case today, but a lot of things have changed over the years, including, like, for example, ChainLocks for extra security, and the way the instant send locks have performed for instant transactions has also been radically changed many, many times over, including back in the old days when I was using it in 2016 or something. You had to check a manual little box for instant send, and it would do a 10x fee, which is still very low, but it was still like it would cost like 10 times as much. And then if you had to make change, like you had like a 1 dash chunk, you spent half of it and the other half went back, that other one would be locked for like a few blocks, and you couldn't instant send 2 times in a row. It would be a little clunky. And then since then, of course, instant send is now every transaction. It's free, like no extra fee. And now you can, each hop gets locked up to like something like 24 hops without a confirmation. So I could send it to you, you could send it to someone else like 24 times in the space of like 2 minutes. And it's all locked and secure in every single step of the way. And then of course you get confirmations. But something you mentioned about like the Tendermint consensus kind of thing, it is kind of funny because Dash has been working on this thing called Evolution, this platform. And as part of that, there's this, the data sidechain is being built that was based on Tendermint consensus. It's actually called Tender Dash because of that, because it's of the similarities. Although supposedly, again, this is way beyond my pay grade, but it's evolved quite a bit to where it's now not quite exactly the same. But there are a lot of those same like Cosmos type roots. And another thing, when ChainLocks was introduced in like 2019, 2020, I believe, the quorum selection method, right? The signatures, the threshold signatures that were used for this, or some of the earliest ever BLS signatures ever used in crypto. And because of that, they didn't have a lot of like standardized ways of doing that. And so when they finally got brought up to be standard, because now BLS signatures are used a whole lot more, something in the way the serialization was changed is what caused that crazy chain halt a few weeks ago. So it's like being way too early in this kind of thing. It's kind of ended up being a thing. But anyway, just some interesting context of how like sort of technologically Dash has diverged significantly from the way it used to be. And I guess there's a lot of similarities to, Cosmos based kind of systems such as Maya. So I just think it's kind of interesting how that happened.
Cosmos doesn't, it's not really a threshold signature scheme. Mm-hmm. Maya and Thorchain do use threshold signature scheme. So in that regard, it's kind of a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of Tendermint, Cosmos, and a little bit of Thorchain. But Thorchain did come after. Thorchain was enabled thanks to research on threshold signature schemes. So it's very recent as well. That's why Thorchain started to be developed also in 2019, which is when the LLQMs came up on Dash. So it's all happening concurrently, and it's amazing how these technological advancements just sprout innovations all over the world in different ecosystems for different uses. In your case, to kind of be able to settle your proof of work chains to avoid so many reorgs and make 51 attacks more difficult. And in the case of Thorchain, on how to secure vaults on target chains. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So now that
who knows what will be developed next? That's the exciting part.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things that are, coming up, and Dash just released, and this is where I haven't had enough time to study it to be able to break it down into really like user-friendly terms. But Dash just released this thing called GroveDB, which is a decentralized database kind of thing that's going to be used in Evolution that essentially makes, from what my understanding, is a significant improvement over a whole lot of different things. And anyway, just like yet more things that I have to like wrap my head around and get everything. But now we started this thing out super technical, kind of, or at least from my side, in an attempt to solve the very simple question of when. Maybe we can move back to the question of what. So, for those who just have been living in a hole and haven't been paying attention at all, let's go into just what is Maya. And so, put up the website on the screen, your go-to cross-chain solution. So, would you mind giving a very quick breakdown of what is the Maya protocol and how did it come? Where did it come from?
Sure. So yeah, we all know and love crypto. I do hope though I'm not.
Oh, I think that might have sound might have cut out for a little bit. Looks a little connection problems, but it's all right. So
Is this
there
better
we go.
with the connection?
I think so. Yeah.
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 So yeah, the crypto we all know and love is here to provide us with a peer-to-peer, self-custody, immutable solution for transferring funds, for moving money around, right? And when it was originally developed, like I don't even think it was meant to be like the solution. It was a proof of concept, and it was so groundbreaking. It took over the whole world, as we're kind of seeing slowly but surely happen. The problem arises when people start diverging in ideas on how to use this technology for different use cases. So we start seeing a divergence of use cases. There's people who want to make it for payments, so block times are reduced, fees are attempted to be made smaller. We look for short settlement and sacrifice some other things for that, right? And for instance, we have Dash. Some others go to composability and how to actually work and make smart contracts happen and kind of uh, allow for a great many applications. So you have Ethereum. Then some others say, look, we just want a very simple blockchain that does very simple consensus just to make specific blockchains for something, like very surgical. So you have Cosmos. And you start having all of these divergence of things. And the thing is, crypto is kind of each blockchain, it's not aware of other blockchains. For it just itself exists. And itself just worries about its own immutability and its own uses, but it doesn't really care about the rest of the world. It doesn't know it, does not aware of it, and thus, although transactions within the blockchain are protected, transactions across blockchains are not. And it might seem even mind blowing that until 2021, so for 13 years of crypto, there wasn't really an option to move between blockchains in a decentralized fashion without trusting a centralized party, a central exchange, which we've seen are grossly irresponsible and not transparent and very much not in the philosophy of crypto. So how can we do better? And that's where Thorchain came in 2021 with their multi-chain chaos net and essentially enabled Bitcoin to ETH transactions without trusting third parties. With a trust minimized way, how we like to call it, because you have a set of 120 over collateralized nodes essentially operating everything transparently with proof of reserves every 3 days. So it's groundbreaking stuff and truly ahead of its time.
Yeah. And
So
so
what Maya
it
comes here
did
to do?
Uniswap come
Go ahead.
before that? So if
Yes,
so, but that was a closed ecosystem, and so all this
correct.
cool DeFi stuff, just for context, it was all like Ethereum and Ethereum tokens. And then so you had
Correct.
like Binance Smart Chain and Binance Smart Chain tokens and all these like isolated things. And then there's
Yes.
like a lot of people got into crypto through Bitcoin or use Bitcoin for other purposes and then other cryptos, of course. And they still, even though there was all this DeFi world over here that with all this promise, for most people, it probably wasn't that useful, right? Because
Yeah.
they couldn't get from like what they need to, like Bitcoin, to other coin, to the ETH world, right? And so
Yeah.
that's kind of what makes it different. Is that correct?
Correct. So like Uniswap took the AMM, automatic market maker concept for pools, and took it to another level. But again, it was just limited to Ethereum. And the question is, how can we do better? How can we actually go and store some value in Bitcoin, interact with a smart contract on Ethereum, and then go and pay my coffee with Dash, all without having to go to Binance and KYC myself in Coinbase and risk getting frozen, my phone's frozen on FTX, et cetera, et cetera, right? So how can we do better? Thorchain came in with that, and it's essentially a solution to allow cross-chain exchange. But with self custody. So I have my Bitcoin on my wallet, and I just send it and receive ETH to my wallet, no questions asked. And that's kind of the next level. And what Maya comes here to do is essentially acknowledge the importance and greatness of what Thorchain developed and say, hey, first off, we need reliability and redundancy. So we don't, if Bitcoin ETH interaction is so important, you cannot just rely on one network like Thorchain. We need to have redundancy, um, because it's critical infrastructure. But on the second, also increment the bandwidth of assets we can have, right? You can essentially just add one asset at a time, and it's a high stakes thing. And we essentially have two teams instead of one, right? So Thorchain right now is working on bringing Binance Smart Chain into Thorchain. We're working on getting Dash into Maya. And the nice thing is Maya and Thorchain interact, because one of the networks that Maya integrated to do cross-chain swapping is Thorchain. So we can swap Dash to Rune on Maya, and then you can go Rune to whatever else is supported on Thorchain. So it's kind of working like a bigger network made of two little networks that are now kind of independent, sovereign, and they each can have issues. They each can innovate and experiment. They each have a slight difference in asset support, uh, but they also both together are stronger. So that's the interesting thing about how Web3 becomes more resilient over time and more reliable over time. In contrast to Web2 systems, where the more time they are in the market, essentially the more corrupt they become. Web3 has kind of the opposite effect of the more time something exists, the broader it becomes, and the more people within it kind of accepts, and the more reliable it becomes. So it's something fascinating about just the game theory of these kind of paradigm shifts in how
Yeah.
institutions work.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, the just having a slightly different model is kind of a. It's good to have a sort of a, a contrast to kind of show things. It kind of reminds me of like the early days when Litecoin was created, where Litecoin is very not very different from Bitcoin at all, but had a couple of parameters different, including, for example, the block time. And one thing I've noticed is the block time of most cryptocurrencies that came after Litecoin, whether it's Monero, whether it was Dash, which was originally forked from Litecoin but then later rebased to Bitcoin, whether it's Zcash, a lot of these ones stuck with a 2.5 minute block time to begin with. And it might be the same. Maybe if there's future Thorchain forks, they might do the LP bonded node kind of thing like Maya in the future. They might be like, yeah, the first design was maybe too conservative. But one thing I thought is interesting. So there was a couple days recently where trading volume on Maya was like over like 500,000 USD in a single day, which obviously by giant exchange terms is like nothing, but in terms of very new decentralized exchange terms might be pretty good. But right now, is at the very moment, is there any difference in the assets you could trade over Maya or Thorchain, or is it so far the exact same assets except Maya has fewer?
Yeah, Maya has fewer. So right now, most of our volume is actually just arbitrage, testers, and enthusiasts. Right now, is both cheaper to trade on Thorchain and has more options. So it's actually even impressive. We can have $1 million volume days, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited and in a rush to bring Dash to market. So believe me, any time spent not launching Dash is because we have to, because I really want to push it through the door. Because with Dash, it will be the first time that Maya has its own asset that there's nowhere else to trade it in. Like it will be now, Maya will be the only way to go Dash Bitcoin, Dash ETH, Dash Rune anything that is trust minimized and instant. So that's kind of, so that's huge for me, and I think it's huge for the Dash community. So it's going to be great in my view, what we will see in results. Perhaps not the first week of having Dash, but after liquidity goes a bit deeper and some Dash applications start putting Maya there natively, and people catch on that the best way to get Maya is on, sorry, Dash is on Maya. it will get quite interesting. And I had the problem, by the way, and you helped me out,
Mm-hmm.
which is I wanted to we needed to do stage testing
Yeah.
last week, and I couldn't find anywhere to get Dash in Mexico, like not even centralized. You go to
Yeah.
Bitso and it's not there. So
And Lord knows
it
I've been bothering the Beatso people for years about this.
oof,
My very first when my first job when I started work living all on crypto in 2015 was writing for Cointelegraph. It was like December of 2015. And my very first article I wrote for them was about Bitso. And so I know those guys for 8 years. I've been harassing them for like six of those 8 years, and they won't do it. So I did my
yeah.
part.
Yeah, so you can't get it on Mexico. You had to
Hmm.
recommend me like a Thailand centralized service that I ended up not using because one of our mods had some Dash around and sent it to me. But oh my god! And now with my eyes, just dude, can you get Bitcoin? Yeah, okay, just go take it and trade it for Dash. That's it. No hassle. That
Hmm.
makes things so simple, I think, and it's kind of underrated how simple that would be. And the thing is, at the end of the day, Dash is one of those few chains that are actually focusing on being useful for payments.
Hmm.
The only other kind of chain I could think of that was so laser focused on that, with the exception to perhaps things like Lightning Network and L2s that
Hmm.
kind of seek to do that for their own ones, would be Terra. And we all know how that went. But they
Yeah.
were focusing a lot on how to make seamless UST payments for like coffee. So and that's always an analogy I say, like, would you go and buy coffee with us? With Dash, you could. Why not? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the interesting thing.
And that's one thing I noticed. I saw someone complaining on Twitter the other day about the high fees about trying to use Tether on Tron. Now, Tether on Tron has become very for people in the developed world, like Western Europe and the U.S. It's very strange to people like that who don't understand real people and real problems. But Tether on Tron has become very popular in a lot of the developing world because people want to use something like dollars. It's not like, bolivars or something that's terrible. It's something that everyone understands and is relatively stable, even though the dollar is stable, but stable in this direction. But also just something that is cheap and fast to use. But the problem is, first of all, this person, because it's a smart contract operation, it's going to cost more than just a regular transaction because it's a special token thing. But also, he ran out of Tron to sell. He didn't understand the gas mechanism or whatever, and so
Yeah.
he had money, but he couldn't send it because he didn't have enough money to send the money. But he did have enough money, just the wrong kind of money. And it's just like, oh, like those situations would be a lot better to have something that's like, native and fast and a little bit more purpose, not just what works today, but will also like work tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we still have a long way to go, and I think that's also part of the reason why I'm so bullish on Thorchain and Maya. Like, more ideas, more innovation is gonna keep coming, and more
Mm-hmm.
divergence, more different designs, more engineering feats, uh, uh, and the more that happens, just the more chains there will be that Maya and Thorchain will need to connect. So
Mm-hmm.
it just makes me bullish. We've seen constantly a divergence of designs instead of a consolidation. So that's what makes me think that what we're building is so necessary, because the more we diverge, if we still just rely more and more on centralized parties, we will become more and more brittle,
Mm-hmm.
and more at the whims and wants of centralized parties and decision makers, just raising the one and saying you're in, you're out, and that's what we've seen as well recently in the U.S. happen, and it's a shame. Um, but again, and I always go back to this book. It's called Why Nations Fail.
Mm.
Uh, Great book about inclusive economical and political institutions. And I don't mean inclusive in the identity part. I mean
Mm-hmm.
inclusive as in anybody can participate openly, and there's no kind of stops and kind of permissions. Uh, Eventually, regimes that close their doors off to inclusive institutions fail, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what will happen to the U.S. if it remains in that path. Whereas
Absolutely.
places where inclusive institutions thrive and are allowed to be to enter and thrive, those are the ones that succeed in the long term. So that's where we're going to see perhaps with El Salvador, Portugal, Singapore, Switzerland, where they're opening their hands and opening their economies to these. Those are going to succeed and thrive. So we just need to, you know, hold on tight. And eventually, those that succeed are the ones that also breed and kind of and
Mm-hmm.
reproduce that model in other places. So, like regimes will eventually be uh, substituted by crypto friendly countries. So, but it will take decades. So, in the meantime, we need options. My thought chain is that option.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me think because so much has been made of these kinds of regulatory moves of like, oh well, is this one work? Does that one work? What country works for this or that? And especially like what the SEC has done in the U.S. has been it has sued U.S. based companies alleging that they sell illegal securities or whatever, but it's just they haven't done anything to actually supposedly harm these sorts of things, right? They haven't done anything like that. What they have done is, I guess, threaten the business interests of the interest of some businesses that are that are there. And so it's kind of funny how like why would a decentralized network go down in price because a government says some company in this one jurisdiction is bad for supporting them. It makes no sense from like logical perspective until you start to think, oh, that's because the access to all this is not decentralized. And like, for example, if you use like sideshift.ai it's a good swap service, right? It's kind of like the old school competitor to something like Thorchain or Maya, and they they don't work in the U.S. But then you turn on a VPN and then they work, and it's just like, oh, well, that's nice. So that kind of stuff is kind of good to have. So for this next thing here, would you mind? I know there's a lot of Dash people that are unfamiliar with the way Maya works, and might have some like concerns over centralization or things like that. Would you mind just explaining the model real quick? Yeah, sorry, can you still hear me or not? Ooh, your sound is off now. Oh no.
I was
Yeah.
on mute.
Oh, there
Now
we go. Yeah, so it wasn't
my
just.
mic was making trouble,
Yeah.
so it off now. I can finally hear you well.
Oh,
So,
nice.
a question, please. Sorry.
Yeah, so we people with the this is a question I guess for the Dash boomers, the old school Dash people that don't understand all this new technology. What's a DEX? What's an AMM? And so they might not be super trusting to use a system like that they might view. They don't understand how it works. So how does Maya work, and is it centralized? What are the risks that people can steal the money and hack it or something like that?
Sure. So, Maya is an L1. It's a chain. It has blocks. Like any other chain, it's completely transparent. Like any other chain, you can go and there's blocks explorers for it and everything. But what makes it stand out is that it's far-reaching. It's not. It's aware of other chains and it's actually tracking other chains, because nodes that run Maya simultaneously run full nodes, not validator nodes, but full nodes in other chains to be aware of their blocks, their transactions. So essentially, what Maya does is scan transactions from Dash, for instance, that are coming to a Maya controlled wallet address. And this Maya controlled wallet address is with a threshold signature scheme of a party of nodes. And it can be up to 20 nodes per wallet. Maya can have up to 120 nodes, so that means Maya can control simultaneously 6 wallets per chain on Dash, for instance. So you send Dash to any of those wallets with instructions of which asset you want to which address. So you say, hey, I want Bitcoin. Please send it to this address. That's in the memo. The memo is abstracted away usually by user interfaces. So you're not really building the memo yourself. The user interface does that for you. But essentially, you say, hey, I have Dash. I want Bitcoin. And what Maya does is observe that transaction, confirm that it's arrived, and do the internal logic in the L1 of Maya and say, okay, this guy sent us Dash, we've received it. Now they want Bitcoin, send it from this address. So we'll go to one of the Bitcoin Maya controlled addresses and send you a Bitcoin to where you told us to. So that's what happens, and this all happens like in a split second. How the exchange rate is set is not with oracles or anything. Rather, there's actually two pools going on at the same time: Dash Cacao pool and Bitcoin Cacao pool. Um, and this is where the word AMM comes, automatic market maker, because in order to avoid using oracles, what Maya always assumes is that the cacao part and the dash part are worth the same. So if they're not in the market, arbitrage will make it be so, because then there's arbitrage opportunities. You're either buying cheap an asset or selling it for more expensive price. So arbitrage takes care of that. So arbitrage will equalize the prices in Maya to the market prices all aboard, and there's no the economic incentive is to make it be equal, because else I have a reason to profit. So it's market driven instead of oracle driven, which is a single point of failure. So all of this just to say that essentially swaps have a very short risk, very small risk, because it has a very short time dimension. I send my Dash, I receive my Bitcoin. I send my ETH, I receive my Rune. I send my Cacao, I receive my Kujira, whatever. So it's this time dimension is very short, as opposed to, for instance, wrapping solutions, where wrapping essentially the time dimension is enlarged to all the time that you hold the wrapped asset, because during all of that time, if I'm holding wrapped Dash on ETH and the wrapping smart contract fails, my Dash is now worthless. So whereas Thorchain and Maya, you just use them for a split instant if you're a swapper. So swappers have very little to worry about, actually. The ones that have more to worry about usually are liquidity providers. Liquidity providers are those who decide to add Dash and Cacao, so both of the economical side of the equation, for the pool to work. So these they do so because they will get a reward. And still there's many mechanisms to secure those funds for LPs. If you want to be an LP, you definitely need to inform yourself much more than for being just a layman swapper. And then you have an option if you're an LP and you want to earn more and also contribute to the network security. You can take your LP position and bond it in Maya to become a node. These nodes are over collateralized, so the funds you're adding will be more than the ones you will protect. But your funds and the funds you protect are both used for swaps, which makes Maya be very capital efficiency. It's essentially like a inverse liquid staking derivative. Typically, a liquid staking derivative, I stake my tokens, they're locked now, and I get a staking derivative that I can then pool or use DeFi with. Whereas here, you're pulling the asset first, and then you're taking the LP units and staking them to run a node. And that stake is essentially a collateral for protecting user funds, well, LP funds from others, and you just get more incentives for doing so. So all of this happens permissionlessly. All of this happens transparently. So you can go right now and see all the blocks on Maya. You can go and see the vaults that Maya controls, verify the funds are there. Every few days, there's a churn, and all those funds are moved, proving that there's access to the funds, not only that the proof of reserves, but proof of use liquidity, proof of you know accessibility, and yeah, it's all verifiable. It's all blockchain. So
Yeah. So who
only
controls?
there
Let
because, sorry,
so I'm
go
gonna
ahead.
be with a kind of dumb sounding question, but on purpose. So who controls these vaults? So let's say there's the Maya pool, I mean the Dash pool in Maya, and you send it in there. It's a wallet of some kind, and people control access to it. And I assume that there's some like automated, stuff at risk where at play where, if this goes in, then this money comes out there according to the rules there. Yeah. But as far as like, does any single party or group of parties have access to the funds? Like if there were, let's say there's 2/3 of nodes decided they could like, they just want to get in and move all that dash out to do something nefarious. So like how does that work?
So 2/3 could
Mm-hmm.
actually. It actually requires 2/3 of the nodes controlling that wallet address to move funds. The thing is they're incentivized not to do so, not because I'm gonna pay you if you behave, but because I'm gonna penalize you if you do not. So if,
Mm-hmm.
if the broader MyUp chain sees that a node set of 20 is stealing from a vault, Maya has access not only to that, but to the rest of these nodes' funds. So
Mm-hmm.
Maya can essentially reallocate the assets those nodes used to have, slash them, for at least the amount that they stole. So sure, go ahead, steal. Maya even makes a profit off of nodes stealing, if
Mm.
and when they do. And now the problem then is, what if the whole Maya is captured? Well, the thing is, when we reach economic security, which we're in the path of doing so later this year, at that point in time, there is an economical loss to doing this, because you have to have essentially 67% of of the funds of the network, but half of that is in cacao. So you stand to lose half of your capital to then
Mm-hmm.
gain 33% of the funds. So you lose, you end up at a net loss.
Mm-hmm.
And when the 75% or more of the LP units are owned by nodes. So that's just the thing. The we have security assumptions that you can read on our white paper.
Mm-hmm. There's a little freeze there for a second. Yeah, but basically it's a game theory system that kind of um, keeps things from having issues. Where if people were they wanted to steal, in order to just run the nodes, they have to have certain amount of money posted to begin with, and they could risk losing that. Or if the nodes decided to go nefarious, they've already invested in a token which would now be rendered worthless if they ended up doing this. And so it's kind of like a game theory balancing that kind of makes everything work. If you think about it, to a certain extent, most like staked situations, including Dash, for example, have the same sort of a game theory type thing in play. Whereas, for example, what is the incentives for, let's just say, a masternode to behave honestly? Their money, right? They've invested a significant amount of money just to make sure the network is running correctly, and if obviously they use that to start doing things like you know surveil people using mixing services, or if they do things like compromise the security of the network, things like that, their investment kind of goes away. And so it's kind of a very similar type of a system. I'm sure that there's always going to be some people who are already, nervous because There's already some people be nervous because they're already sort of trusting the security assumptions of whatever thing that they're actually using. Let me just turn this thing off real quick. They already have the security assumptions that they're trusting for the cryptocurrency they're using, and then they're like, okay, well, now I have to learn and trust other security assumptions for an entirely other chain to swap it. But it does seem like the entire system works a little bit more smoothly with that base kind of assumption. Well, it seems like the Bitso folks. No, just kidding. I'm not slandering him. Someone got to Aaluxx, so he dropped out for a second. We'll see if we can get him back in. But in the meantime, good thing that I did have a little bit of a. So I'm gonna switch to. Should probably also mute this one. But anyway, there's a on gitlab.com/maya-chain/one-stop/shop. There's a one-stop shop for just kind of everything Maya, right? You got the entire, GitHub, what is Maya, all this kind of other stuff. A whole lot of stuff there. One thing that you should definitely pay attention to. So I have personally found that the Maya Discord is one of the most, one of the most vibrantly run Discords I've seen in recent times. It's Aaluxx is there like all the time. Aaluxx the patient, I call him, because he's always extremely patient with trolls and scammers and people like that who come and do whatever other nonsense. But it's a great resource for just about everything on Maya. I found it to be a very positive and happy and useful community. Also in the Thorchain community, and let's see if he's back. Ooh, there we go.
Wi-Fi is being a bitch.
That's all right. Don't worry. I kept did the stalling for you, but yeah, basically, as you were mentioning about the incentive structure of the security model, I was kind of comparing it to stake systems, including like the Dash Masternode system, where people have to put up money and to run the network, and if they start doing bad things, they of course risk all their capital. So there's incentives to keep that from happening. So it kind of helps keep actors be more honest. Now, one other little bit of question on that kind of front is on the security front, not from like the game theory front, but what about the security? So, for example, what about the risks of someone, for example, either there being a bug in the code which causes someone to be able to say, let's just say I put in like 0.1 Bitcoin, and then there's a bug where I get, depending on the memo that I put in, I just get all the Dash in the pool back, and it's not like no one acted maliciously. It was a bug, and that kind of thing happens. What do you think are the odds of something like that happening, or what have you kind of done to mitigate stuff like that?
Well, this is where we have the benefit of inheriting a very solid code base, just like Dash did when they forked the Bitcoin Cash and then rebased Bitcoin. You essentially inherit a lot of the security measures and redundancy and reliability of the code itself. So Thorchain is a battle-hardened code for years out now. Has had its trouble in the past. That's made it make it more resilient in many ways. So for example, there's a solvency tracker that is constantly checking what Maya thinks it should have versus what the wallet actually has. And all 120 nodes are always looking at both and comparing both numbers. If there's a difference of even 1%, that assets pool will be halted for nodes to be able to determine what happened and put in a fix for it. So stuff like that. There's many more. Like if there's a large transaction, it will take longer the larger the transaction is compared to average volume. So if you say all of a sudden 100% of the dash pool is being sent out to somebody, that transaction will not be signed right away. It will actually delay in doing so. But we will be able to see the outbound and say, hey, wait, there's a problem here. Probably halt signing and then take a look and then continue. So all of this is happening by node consensus. So yeah, there's just many security measures. But it's definitely something sensitive because you're managing assets of different people in different chains. So it's definitely high complexity system that must be closely operated by both nodes and dev teams. So
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely remember because I was using I was one of the early, not the very earliest, but I was a relatively early user of Thorchain in like early 2021 and before mainnet being in the chaosnet age. And so I remember I didn't do very well on my Ethereum LPing because Ethereum was down for several months, and then right when like the price surge and everything was happening, and yeah, I remember.
I was there with you.
Yeah,
I was there with you. I was in E through an LP as well, so I know firsthand.
suffered together, and then I also LP'd some UST, which is that's always fun. Uh, but so
Me too.
yeah, because we make the same mistakes together.
Yeah.
So as far as all that, so I've witnessed a lot of these kinds of exploits and problems in the past, and none of them were serious. I guess super serious. Like they all got reimbursed by the Thorchain treasury, and since then I haven't seen a major exploit like that in Thorchain. It's been a couple years, or a year and a half or so. I have noticed there have been quite a few, like every few months. And I've noticed this on Maya too, but Maya's so new that it's almost like not worth noticing. I've noticed some chain halts, whereas more specifically on specific chains, like specific trading is halted for this thing, for the other thing, for the other thing, and then it gets resumed.
That will be normal,
Yes.
totally expected.
Yeah,
And
kind of
I'd
like
like
it.
to mention that because then people complain sometimes. We need to understand that we're managing different chains, right? And these chains update, just like Dash updated to 19, then 19.1, then 19.2. This brings changes. So right now, 19.2 brought some breaking changes to how wallets are managed. So now we have to change that in the code. So you will definitely have to expect some downtime from, for instance, Shanghai update of ETH, the mempool issues Bitcoin had because of BRC20, all of that changes things. And those changes, unfortunately, are not under the control of Thorchain or Maya. We cannot say, hey, guys, please don't change this that way because it's going to make me have to halt. Bitcoin is just going to change. And this happens not only to Thorchain and Maya. Central exchanges have to do these changes too. They just have the luxury of doing it less transparently. So because of that, or have the option to do it manually also. Some central exchanges resort to that. So yeah, it's something to be expected. It will be part of doing business in a DEX like Maya and Thorchain, and any other different design that seeks to integrate multiple chains. Code changes, code develops, code needs to be maintained, and sometimes it can be done flawlessly. Like, hey guys, we know these changes coming up, and don't even notice. But one out of every 10 times, there will be a small issue, and that small issue might then be solvable without halting. But then one out of 10 of those will result in a halt.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it is normal. That being said, I have to, I guess, bring up a concept that I've heard because crypto has a bunch. The crypto world is there's a lot of technical knowledge, but there's even more like I guess people stick to principles or things that they say. And there's a lot of these little sound bites that people say on like Twitter to sound smart, and sometimes they are, sometimes usually they're not. One of the things is if the chain can be halted, it's centralized. I've seen that being said, or it's not decentralized. And so it might be like, for example, if like the Bitcoin chain keeps going, right? The Dash chain keeps going. All these things just kind of keep going. If there's not a major exploit or problem, there's no way for anyone to stop the chain necessarily. Now, and that's what people assume. That's because no one, it's just decentralized, man. And so when they see something that where elements get turned off, and now this is a little bit different for Dash because over the years Dash has had these things called sporks, which are things that they use to specifically turn on or off different functionality to make hard fork upgrades easier. And so, there's been a few little like manually turned on kind of things that then again can be overridden, but is still like a little like a manual sort of a switch. So I guess the Dash community is a little bit less sensitive to like, oh, well, if it stops ever, if someone could stop the thing, it's not decentralized. But so what is the mechanism for halting and unhalting chains? And
Sure.
is that a decentralized element to any of that?
Sure. First, let's clarify one thing. One thing is to halt trading of a chain. So we say, hey, ETH is, on maintenance. We will disallow ETH trading on Maya. And another thing is halting Maya, and that doesn't happen. Blocks keep churning every block, and you can move your cacao, move your Maya tokens, move your synths. What you can't do simply is trade ETH because there's a maintenance issue happening. So people saying, hey, you can halt the chain. No, we're not halting Maya. We're just stopping the vault from being able to send out transactions. And this is something just that LPs submit to. So an LP is submitting their assets to Maya, and they're not only giving us their assets, they're hoping that we will be responsible with them as a network. Part of being responsible with them is avoiding them to be lost, just because we don't want to have any downtime because some dude on Twitter will say we're centralized. Now, about that mechanism and how it works, there's actually how it currently works and then how it will work. How it currently works, essentially, both admins and nodes can set something called Mimir. And these Mimir are transparent. So first off, important to mention, all of these is verifiable on chain. So I cannot say one thing and do another. So admins, which is essentially our team, can send a transaction to change those values, but nodes by 2/3 consensus can overwrite them. So it's not decentralized. It actually is, because nodes by consensus are deciding to keep Mimir settings as they are. It's a consensus on chain, verifiably. It's governance. People need to understand halting is part of the governance process of Thorchain and Maya, but we need to be quick about it. So we cannot wait for nodes to 2/3 vote to halt the chain when there's evidence that it can be exploited.
An emergency.
Rather, we rule, and then nodes can overrule, or they can also just rule by consensus when there's no time pressure. So because of this, we're essentially like there's no centralization here. It's just quick response time, and then nodes can say, "Hey, you're wrong. We shouldn't be halting. ETH, please go back online with 2/3 consensus." So it's actually completely decentralized. It is just unconventional, and people love to make false equivalences. So this sounds similar to this. Thus, every time I read this is bad, and we get that, for instance, with the dual token design Maya has. Maya has Cacao, which was launched fairly to LPs. It's also the governance token. It was all given away, and it's all in the pools today, circulating with no inflation. Great token. And we separated that from the Maya token, which is how the team gets incentivized, which is a revenue sharing mechanism that has no governance rights and it's not tradable, so it's not actually taking liquidity. But we got a lot of, no, dual tokens is bad. It's a money grab, or it fractures liquidity, or so many things, because we try and make computation easier for our minds. And you start developing heuristics. If this, then that, instead of actually scratching further. And it's totally normal, because we cannot just keep reasoning whether this table will work every time I see a table. I just assume it's a table and it will hold stuff, right? I don't need to reason again. But there are sometimes when just extra reasoning is warranted, and you need to be on the lookout of challenging those assumptions and heuristics you made, because they don't usually hold water. once you actually scratch them. So in this case, yes, we can halt chains. No, we cannot halt Maya. And even when we halt chain, it's done with a open, transparent, governance-oriented, decentralized process.
Yeah, and that's basically it's very similar to the Spork system in Dash, where ooh, I didn't hear what you said just now. Did your audio cut
No,
out?
I muted myself.
Okay,
Dogs just come back from a walk.
you're just yelling at the dogs, just like oh. But the it's kind of the same thing with the Spork system. Now I don't know if now the way to override the Spork system is obviously you could easily just change a couple lines of code, and then the master nodes can implement that and everything. Kind of you take away the sporking ability, but I don't think it has that elegant of a rapid consensus model where you could have the master nodes go click a button to override consensus and shut down the spork. But also a lot of sporks have been phased out as they become unnecessary over time as the technology improves. But yeah, generally speaking, I think that's a very good model. What I think would be, and this is not like a recommendation, just like a top of the head kind of thing for bragging rights, it would be nice for nodes to be able to do a the emergency key, as it were, to be able to reassign the emergency key, like have like an actual intentional mechanism for that. So let's just say they want to give it they're tired of the current team. They like that Chad fellow who's big in the Thorchain community, and they're like, you know what, we want only Chad to have this thing, and then the 2/3 consensus, they just give him the key, and then he can
They
still
could.
halt. Is it like an explicit mechanism, or would it have to be like, well, you change some lines of the code in the next upgrade, then?
Yeah, you will have to change the code. But at the end of the day, how tendering works is essentially 2/3 consensus on a code base. And that can be changed. That can be changed on a whim by nodes if they decide to do it. It would require a code change, yes, it would. But what Thorchain is doing slowly is moving out of that admin Mimir and making all of it just node Mimir. And how that will work, what Mimir is how we control these settings or the module that is. But how it will work essentially, and they're still finalizing the details, is uh, essentially, yeah, the details are still, I still need to even myself understand them, but essentially, very few set of nodes can propose a change and have it happen, but it will expire if not more nodes start agreeing with those nodes. That way, you essentially, let's say just 3 nodes vote for it, then it has a 1 hour expiration. But once 6 nodes are on, then it's 2 hours. Once 2/3 of nodes, now it's permanent. That way, and you also have the ability to even raise alarm, but each node has up to 3 alarms per month. So I can, if I notice something's wrong, I can boom and raise an alarm, and that would essentially override the system I just mentioned. But that if it was a false alarm, I can get slashed, and then if it was true, then I can get my emergency allowance back, and I don't get slashed. Stuff like that. So it's still like being worked on because it needs to be sensitive. What I mean with sensitivity is that a very small noise has to be able to be translated into a signal of doing something, stopping, pausing LP, hot signing, change some value, stuff like that. But as it has to be sensitive in the short term, but then consensus based on the larger time dimension. So it's just we're gonna enact that. Now Maya has the benefit of being younger, and younger protocols will have kind of more permission to be in the process of handing out all of that authority. So we still have Node Mimir that can override us, but we will probably stay with the admin Mimir for a year or two, just like Thorchain did, while we kind of expand the network, decentralize it, expand the user base, since you do need kind of a clear path and a clear direction at the beginning stages of a project. But
Yeah.
we're on that path too, and the learnings from Thorchain will, of course, help us in how we manage that process moving forward.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting also because, which by the way, Michael Cluster, hi Michael, in the live chat, he mentions that Dash sporks are being phased out. Now I knew they were being, many of them were being phased out. I didn't necessarily know all of them were, but it's kind of a very interesting contrast because Bitcoin obviously is designed. It's kind of like the OG one, and then they had an early like a alert system in the beginning, the very early days of Bitcoin that I believe got phased out, got taken out, and then Satoshi kind of ran a lot of it, and then when Satoshi disappeared, then it just kind of like it's just running on magic, just kind of going on, and people love that sort of mythos. And to like today, there's a lot of much more advanced kinds of functionality the blockchains need that in a lot of cases warrants a much more responsive design, a much more like, it's much more interactive. It's not just like, well, all the miners are mining, it auto adjusts and everything's going. It's just like sometimes you need these individual actors to not just be like run a mining machine and that's it, just like doing other things. They need to like, come on, we need you guys' attention to do things. And Dash is kind of was kind of like one of the earlier ones that sort of demanded more attention, because with the governance process, every month you have to actually vote on proposals. I mean, you don't have to. Actually, a lot of masternodes don't. It's a minority. I wouldn't say a small minority, but a minority of nodes do vote on a particular cycle, depending on whatever. But it kind of demands that like you got to like show up and do things, otherwise, things could be different. And so, yeah, for some people who are maybe a little bit more old school, yeah, that's kind of the way it is. Now, another thing that Michael Cluster asked was, he just said, did you talk about the test transaction on Dash already? I guess the test Maya transaction. Was there? Are we talking? Is that in reference to the ChainLocks thing we mentioned earlier?
What do you mean?
I guess he'd have to explain it more, but he said he says, love the concept of Maya. Did you talk about the test transaction on Dash already? So I think he means like a test, like a StageNet transaction on Maya. And if he's talking about the transaction, maybe he means there was something that, with testing, as we mentioned earlier, that showed that ChainLocks throws up some interesting kind of unforeseen problems. Maybe that's what he's talking about, but you'd have to, of course, explain. Oh, he said we saw it in the op return. Well, this individual also runs this website that tracks a whole lot of Dash statistics, and I believe he has some like op return kind of thing to watch for things like that. And so basically, he's gonna start to be like tracking all the Maya stuff. But anyway, that's a little.
Well, we already have a StageNet address, but because of the ChainLock stuff, as soon as StageNet encountered these issues with some blocks not being chain-locked, it started providing giving out some errors. So we've been fixing that before we actually continue with stage testing Dash. So we're wrapping up right now. For instance, what we're doing now, we already fixed the problem, but as we're working now on smoke tests, we need to make a Dash test environment that simulates the faulty chain locks or the lagged chain locks in order for the smokes to be useful in simulating what's happening. So that's what we're working on right now. As soon as we have those smoke tests, essentially smoke tests is Dash is changing and Maya is changing, but we run those smoke tests to make sure that the base functionality of what they should be doing when they interact is remains the same, and it's integral, right? It's like your DNA is mutating. By the way, I study biotech, so your DNA is mutating, but you go ahead and read to test whether it says what it should say, and if not, incorrect, right? So that's kind of an alarm for us before we, for instance, launch next version and next version and next version that, hey, there's an issue here. Dash made some update, or Maya made some update that broke the smoke test. So let's fix the smoke test. So once we have that fixed, we will now do this new version 105 and stage test it again. And in doing so, you will start seeing some Dash to Cacao transactions happen on StageNet. And once we see that's good and looks good, we would push all of that to mainnet. So yeah, we're just going through the motions of a pipeline of testing, just to make sure it's solid.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we're talking about interfaces because just like the Dash network is just like a network, and you need actual explicit like wallets to actually make this stuff work. You do need interfaces to make trades, etc. on Maya. So, what interfaces are going to when happens? Which interfaces are going to be available for people to trade with Dash on Maya?
So right now we have Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT, and USDC, Rune from Thorchain, and Cacao from Maya. And Rune, through Rune, you can then go to Doge, Avax, BNB, Atom, and stuff like that. So actually quite a large offering. And on Maya, we are looking to add also Kujira, Arbitrum, and ADA later this year. So slowly
Yeah.
but surely, the amount of routes you can take.
Yeah, and so
Will
which
increase.
interfaces or front ends are going to be available at launch?
So at least Thor Wallet, they already added Dash to Thor Wallet as an asset, and they're very much engaged with us to bring Dash as quickly as possible. Um, we also have the rest of the interfaces, Dorado, Swapper, uh, First Wallet, and many more coming, that should be lagging behind a few weeks, and integrating that as well. So yeah, it's kind of like two parts. One is to ship the future, and then another one is to actually have it be available everywhere. So though you can see that as kind of like two different launches. Uh, so yeah, we first have to have Dash on mainnet. Then it's a question of filling the pool. The pool needs to be deep, enabling trading, then enabling other futures, and then having user interfaces have that happen, or work flawlessly with the rest of the assets. It's a
Yeah.
process, everything.
So when we're talking about these kinds of like front ends and options, I was just showing, by the way, the Thor wallet thing on the screen. Where we're talking about that kind of stuff, one thing, as you mentioned, like Rune as a tradable asset, which is not on Thorchain because it's just it's the base Thorchain asset, right? And so about, for example, swapping from Dash to Rune and then Rune to say Bitcoin Cash, and so those steps. So first of all, is this already an automated thing in something like Thor Wallet? Like, is this going to be just like a one click, like you do the drop down of assets and Dash and drop down to Bitcoin Cash, and you can just swap that, or is that kind of future plan thing?
User interfaces could automate it with some centralization, having their wallet be the one receiving the rune. So that's not desirable. But very soon, right now you have to do it with two signatures. So you get the rune, and then you go and swap rune to Bitcoin Cash in the same user interface. Well, there's a feature called data pass through, and this feature will be coming to both Thorchain and Maya. What it allows you to do is to append memos to memos. So this way you would be able to swap. For instance, what the user interface would need to do, for instance, let's say you're doing Atom to Dash. So you send Atom to the Rune wallet of Maya. So this is all done by the user interface, so you don't need to worry about it. But The
Yeah.
user interface is when you say to receive uh, I want to receive Dash to this wallet. What they do
Mm-hmm.
is send the atom to a Thorchain address with the memo addressed to the Maya address of Rune with the data pass-through memo of instructions to send that rune, to swap that rune into Dash to the address of the user. So it's kind of two memos kind of nested into each other. And yeah, we're working on that so that will allow it to be seamless and one signature. And it's very powerful, and we're highly incentivized to do so because that means that, for instance, the Trust Wallet integration that they have with Thorchain automatically can now outbound to Dash. Then, if they want to have Dash as an inbound asset, then they would have to integrate Maya directly for the other way around, for the other direction. But that essentially makes all of Maya's assets outbound candidates for current Thorchain integrations without them integrating Maya, which is great. So yeah, we're working on that data pass through. I'm not sure how many weeks it will take us for this. It can be 10, it can be 20, but it's something we definitely want and will do.
Yeah, because that'll definitely make things a lot simpler. So in the meantime, if you wanted to do a one-click thing, you'd have to just have a custodial interface, I guess, right, or temporarily
Yeah,
custodial.
yeah, temporary custodial, very short, but I'm not a fan, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to promote that very much. But it's also what the UX of going Dash Rune and then doing the Rune Beacon Cache will be actually quite easy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just a two-step process, and it's not very long.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's part of the steps we need to be like we need to walk before we run, right?
Yeah. Now, let's get into some of the more interesting. Now we're kind of getting into the technical bits of like how swaps happen, where you literally just send a transaction with a memo into a pool, and just it gets interpreted by a system, and there you go. And it, again, having an appended memo would be, oh, it sends it in here, which sends it in there, and then that one tells it this, and then that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, but that's where the fun stuff happens. But as far as so right now, we're just talking about swaps, just trading. And at some point, you should be able to do some kind of interesting things beyond that. So, how easy is it to sort of to integrate automated swapping into, let's say, certain like apps and services? So, for example, let's just say I am a merchant and I want to take crypto, and there's all kinds of assets supported by Maya, but I don't like the volatility because I need to be able to pay my employees at the end of the month, and I don't want to take that risk, and I also don't want to use a centralized fiat payment provider, like a Coinbase or something like that. So, how difficult would it be to program in, like, let's say, a point of sale system to every time so like if I accept when the customer pays me as a merchant, he sends me the transaction to an address but with a memo, and the address is the Maya, let's say, Dash pool, and the memo is swap for X stablecoin like USDC to this address. How difficult is something like that to program in so then every single time this merchant gets paid, it just gets auto converted to a stablecoin?
I think it could be a job done by a user interface that the that generates essentially a QR of what the merchant wants to receive and where, and then gives the option to the user to then say which asset to send, and then it generates the memo and the payment to do it. So it would have to it can totally be done on the user interface side. because essentially you have all the info you need. I know what asset the merchant wants and to which address. Now I just want to know from which asset, which the user inputs and sends it out, and that's it. So it could totally be done that the merchant has kind of the QR code ready, um, on their, in their locale, or however you call it, and then uh, the user inputs the amount and sends them the funds out.
Yeah, I can imagine something like that being quite interesting for like an application of people trying to use like a truly like decentralized financial system by just doing this sort of auto conversions. Another thing that kind of struck me, so one thing I noticed, so it seems like Thor Wallet in particular is making some interesting strides beyond just as a swapping interface. I've seen them with like fiat off ramps, with things like that, with some kind of a debit card that they're talking about. There are like a bunch of interesting things that I really have to dive into deeper. But one thing I noticed that I think is really interesting is they have so no KYC fiat on ramps for up to a certain amount. And that's one of the biggest frictions of crypto, is doing KYC so you could buy it. And that kind of stuff looks really cool, especially, if you could say in the US buy like $1,000 a year without having to do full KYC. That's like great to get people started to try that stuff out. And the thing is, on ramps are, regulated. And a lot of these regulated companies operate in jurisdictions where the banks don't want to work with certain assets, and that's been something that plagues Dash for a long time, because dark coin, privacy coin, it's an evil one, we can't use that. So do you think it could be feasible for some sort of a fiat on ramp to program in a withdraw to Dash option, to where, let's just say you want to buy Litecoin or something? Well, maybe not Litecoin, because it's on that would be on Thorchain, and then we're talking about the memos, like, the whole memo trick of, all that stuff. But let's just say Bitcoin. Someone buys Bitcoin, and then for their receiving address, instead of just their own wallet, the on ramp puts in the Maya pool with the memo to say swap for Dash at this address. Is that something that you think could be feasible for like an off ramp to do, so they can sell you assets that they don't even sell you, if you know what I mean?
I think it would be up to them to kind of support those types of actions. Obviously, Maya and Thorchain, we can do a lot of features to facilitate more use cases, but a lot of this is just user interfaces with their UX, and how they kind of put many things together in a whole. So yeah, many things can be done. Like, I have Bitcoin and I buy NFTs on ETH. That can happen. That could already happen. Just people are just not aware of the power Thorchain and Maya have yet, but they will catch on. And it just will become part of the infrastructure tool set when working with all of this stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of the magic kind of thing, is when you don't see, when things just work and you don't see all the crazy things happening behind the scenes. I saw something at one point, I can't remember where exactly, but there was a mock-up of an interface. There's a mock-up of an interface that was showing a Dash wallet with the ability to send to like a Bitcoin address. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, you could do that. You could definitely do that with user interface load. It's definitely doable today. So maybe you build it.
Yeah. All right. So let's start to bring this thing to a close pretty soon. Thanks everyone for chatting. I know. So Great Wolf had a question, then I have a last question, and we're good. He said, has the Maya community reached out to Shapeshift on integrating Maya as another DEX on the platform? I know they're currently using Thor at the moment.
Yes, we have.
Nice. Well, Tell Eric to.
We've reached out to everyone, guys. Now it's just a matter of time. Things. So we kind of have a shopping list of what each of those people that will integrate us want or need, or the time frames they've given us, and we follow up with them weekly with the ones we have stuff pending, or we just know that once we have Dash, these guys will be in. Once we have Kujira, these guys will be in. Once we have Savers, these guys will be in. Once we've been at 3 months with no exploits, these guys will be in. So we have our list and we just go through the motions.
Yeah, go through everything. And so finally, when happens, uh, what can the Dash community do to make the integration a success? Like, I know that there's been a lot of like a discussion about like, oh, remember like Thorchain did a great job launching, obviously, and then there has been some criticism. I don't know how much of it's warranted. I haven't really looked into the numbers of some of their chains that they've added have really failed to deliver. Like, oh, let's do Doge when Doge spikes were everywhere, but then like not a lot of Doge people used it, for example. And then oh, Luna, well then of course Luna goes to you know what. But so to make sure that that's not like oh yeah they added Dash but it didn't really do anything for them. What can we do to make sure that's not the case, that the Dash launch is as successful as possible?
There's essentially three things that are the most important. Use it, LP it, and request it. So what do I mean? If you want this to succeed, but then you end up using Dash in your centralized exchange of choice, then
Who
you know
cares?
what the hell? Curious. Number two is making the pool deeper will make it cheaper. So the more people add pooled assets to the Dash Cacao, the better. It will make the settlement cheaper. And finally, we need to have Dash be available. So if you reach out to the wallets you typically use on Dash, the user interfaces, the front ends, and you tell them to support it. If you reach out to people you know on Dash and tell them to use it, stuff like spread the word and request it as a feature for the ways you use Dash daily. Because if it's easier to use for you, it would probably be easier to use for people that don't yet know about Maya, and will make it more likely to bring in volume. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of just Dash specific. And then how you can support Maya? Well, you can contribute, you can spread the word, you can uh, uh, LP funds of other things, you can run a node. There's many things you could do.
Yeah, you could send Dash into the Dash pool with the memo to Aaluxx as a gift, thank you. And just although that honestly, like what would happen if someone just added a custom memo that just did not indicate a trade, that just had some little note like
It refunds it. It's
just auto
refunded,
refunds it.
but there's a memo called donate, so you
Oh,
can actually donate your Dash to the pool if you like.
and then who owns the Dash after that? Is it just like does that get donated to all the people who already have their own funds in there, or is it just separate, or where? How does that
Yeah,
work?
there's four ways to donate funds, but that's already very technical.
Yeah, and probably
Uh,
if probably people have funds to donate, they should probably just LP in instead, right?
yeah, yeah, just LP it.
Yeah,
That's good enough, and
yeah,
just LP it and burn your ledger.
of course.
And
Yeah,
it's as good as.
yeah. Don't mess around with too many custom memos on Maya. I learned that one the hard way. But
Yeah.
anyway, uh, everyone, where can they follow you in Maya and all the best progress and things? Where can they? Where's the best place for them to post when every few days?
Well, you can follow us more publicly in the Maya underscore protocol on Twitter for official comms and the mayaprotocol.com website. You can from there go and join us on our Discord as well. Discord is by far the best resource. It's where we go in more in-depth talks and more kind of detailed stuff and comments and updates, and where we most follow up with the you know latest and greatest. On Twitter, we also have a Mondays with Maya every Monday, with me giving updates of what we're doing, how it's going. So definitely a good place to join if you'd like to keep up with us. And yeah, we have our docs. If you want to learn more about us, docs.mayaprotocol.com. You'll find a lot of info there for you. And yeah, you'll find wherever, in whichever of those, you'll probably find a crazy guy called Aaluxx, and you can just give him a follow, because I'm very active on those socials as well, myself, commenting and sharing. So you can go ahead and follow me, Aaluxx Myth. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for having us,
Yeah, no
my friend,
problem.
and
I'm sure we'll
look
do.
forward to episode 3. By the way, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, you should link the very first time we talked, probably like 6 or 8 months ago. Those are great calls. So definitely
Yeah.
uh, good good episode 1. This is episode 2, and upcoming episode 3 with Dash Online will be quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's gonna be a lot of fun. Well, thanks for being on. We'll do a bunch of more Twitter spaces and everything else, I'm sure, over the course of the next few months. Just keep the good stuff going.
Only
Use Maya. For people who want to start using Maya now, even though they don't use Dash, they would just go to like Thor Wallet and just choose the Maya option when they're doing a swap, right?
yeah, yeah. They can go to Thor Wallet, Dorado, First Wallet, Swapper, or Rango Exchange right now and use Maya. And more coming every few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't stop this train. All right, great stuff, guys. Happy Friday. Don't forget to subscribe on
Thank
your
you
way
all.
out, and hit the like button, all that stuff. And I will see you guys next week or in about a month for the next installment of the Dash podcast. But either way, Twitter and Discord is always a great place to ask when. So do that frequently. All right, guys. Have a good one. Bye bye.
All right,
Good
guys. Good
weekend.
weekend, everyone. Bye bye.